fellow Americans.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, there's 4 groups out there, and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions of relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You have indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compelled. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the President now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the Major's. The Major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the President have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
That I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I was
you've already
still in
done.
Parliament...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be on the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans, right. You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get NIH, one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among animals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's let Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well, wait a minute.
It did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
It is molecularly.
Those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That
is
not.
You can't get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth. You are the one.
Time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible
No one's
to
saying
result
they are. No
in
one's saying those viruses
SARS-CoV-2.
caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were
They're not.
animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And
won't
you
admit the truth.
and you implying
Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond.
and you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individual. I totally resent
could
that.
have been.
And if
And it
anybody
could
is
have been.
lying here, Senator, it is you.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
So welcome back, everyone, to Redacted on this Monday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And we're so glad to be back here in the studio, ready to bring you the news. It's been a little while. We've got a jam-packed show, very, very busy news day for you. And news week, we're going to get to a lot of news that's unfolded over the past 48 hours, 72 hours. It's been developing. Among the stories we're going to cover is a story that is decades old, decades in the making, and it has to do with the 9/11 attacks.
Yes.
And wow, no one is covering this story. Bombshell new documents speaking to how involved the 19 hijackers were and who, with help on the inside. What kind of help did they have inside of the United States? This has long been a question from the families of the 9/11 terror attack victims. Who was working inside the United States? And boy, do we have some answers tonight on the show.
Plus, we are going to cover the document leaks that show that the U.S. has been lying about its involvement in the war in Ukraine, as well as the forecast of that war. And also, these documents are going after, I mean, it brings up the age-old question. Is there truth in whistleblowing? Is there a social component to that is in the public need? We're going to talk about that, as well as the continued lies that the Biden administration continues to just lay on out there for us.
We're also going to look at the new international digital currency that was quietly rolled out while you were on spring break, while other people were out doing their thing. The mainstream financial news, your Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg News, none of them covered this story, but there's a brand new international digital currency, the backbone for how all of us will start to carry out our new digital currency transactions in the future. So we're going to look at all of that. We've been hard at work, and we're going to bring that to you because Redacted is back, and we start right now. Hello, everyone. Welcome on YouTube. Welcome on Rumble. Good to see all of you. Love to see that. We went away for a vacation for spring break. Our kids were out, so we did a little tour of the Middle East, and it was an eye-opening experience, to say the least. The lies that you are told about the Middle East are pretty staggering, but it was heartening, very heartening to meet so many Redacted viewers in different ports and different areas where we were, and in London and
yes.
and different parts of the Middle East.
It was very exciting.
I'm just thinking of people like Kyrie, hello, Janice and your family. There's so many great people that came up to us and said hi.
We love meeting viewers in the airport. This is our thing. And also, thank you for saying hello to us, because it impresses our children, because, their generation puts high stock in being a YouTuber.
Yeah, but don't do it for that reason. Just say hi to us because you love the show.
I just want it to be known that I don't mind it, because I like the cool points with my son, because I don't have many.
Like what? Oh, Dad's on CNN? Who cares?
Who cares?
Dad's on YouTube? Rumble? Even better, Rumble? That's right. So yeah, it was great. And then, of course, we get back, and then we weren't expecting to have this quite a time off, and then massive flu hit our house.
Yes.
So I saw some people in the chat. They're like, "Damn, Clayton looks thin." That's the flu talking. So 5 days of high fever, and I still have a fever today, right now.
He's a slow burner. Clayton's just rocking it out at 99.
So if I take a deep breath, I can't. I might cough, and if I pass out, well, just let me sleep.
You do still have the sexy voice, the cold, sexy voice.
So David and Philip, how are you guys?
I've got the single shot. If you pass out, this is the show now.
Here I am.
So what you'll see is
I'm fine. Usually, I'm the first one to go.
I'll look like one of those COVID newscasters. When they're like, now for the weather report.
Not a thing we should be making fun of.
And then I'll wind up on.
I don't think we should make fun of them, but it does seem to be a thing.
Another newscaster just went and got a jab and passes out on live television.
How'd that happen?
So that'll be me.
All right. Well, he has not recently been jabbed with anything.
I did not get anything. I did not get any jabs, except I did get the flu. Anyway, we've got a lot of news to get to tonight. Enough about us. Briefly, I do want to mention, though, we do have a daily newsletter. We publish it every day when we're not on vacation or have the flu. And it is officially started back up today. So all you need to do to subscribe is go to redacted.inc, put in your email address. You'll receive a welcome email. And then you'll receive that email in your inbox first thing in the morning when we publish the newsletter tomorrow morning around 6:30 a.m. Eastern time. That's our goal. We try to cover about 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a little humor, make you laugh a little bit, cover some of the markets, what's going on with gold, silver, just kind of start your day. And we try to do it with a little bit of humor. So anyway, redacted.inc is the place to go. So I've got some energy now. We'll see if
Let's see how long it lasts.
if I make it through.
Look at those fancy mugs.
Yes, we got new Redacted mugs. You too can drink out of something like this from the Redacted store. We've got new graphics. We've got new, we are renewed. Hi, Becky Wager.
Yeah, look, the team has been working hard. Grim and David and Philip have been working hard putting these together. So our new Redacted, if you become a subscriber to the channel here, your name will pop right up here on the screen. We've got a new Rebel Rockers S. So throughout the show, if you see names popping up here, that's what happens. They've either subscribed or become a VIP member. So good to see all of you. We've got a bunch of big news to get to. So enough about our little bringing you up to speed on our lives. Let's get to your lives and what's important in the world.
We're going to talk about 9/11. Now, this is one of the stories that we know. Were we living 20 years ago with the current rules of the internet, we may not be able to talk about this story. As it is right now, we are going to talk about newly released documents, a new court filing about inside involvement with 9/11 hijackers. We are going to do this with, the recently unredacted information. But again, it's interesting to note that, in this sort of authoritarian society that we're living in, we are going to talk about it under the rules we are still allowed to talk about, but we know that it would be different if this were a more recent story.
Oh, for sure. Now, one of the most heavily redacted documents in American history, it turns out, has to do with the 9/11 hijackers. Who knew? Who knew, right? If you wanted information about this, it was heavily redacted, almost entirely blacked out. You couldn't read it. Maybe even more so than the JFK documents that we get dumped on us on a regular basis by the Biden administration. Why did the U.S. government want to keep you in the dark, keep this information from you about 9/11? Well, it seems odd, right? Especially if they were all about transparency. I mean, they had a full-on events about 9/11 transparency on the Capitol steps about let's be as transparent and open as we possibly can. What happened on 9/11? We want to know about it. The families are demanding answers. We want to know. And Congress said, yes, absolutely. That's what we want. So if they had been truthful on that day, then why all the redactions in documents? Well, that heavily redacted document has just been unredacted. And thanks to a court proceeding at the Guantanamo Bay Military Court. Again, what you're about to hear is not our opinion. These are unredacted documents that were just revealed as part of a military court proceeding, to be clear. Right now, no U.S. media organizations, none that I can find, are covering this story. It's total media silence in the United States on this, but we're going to hear in a moment. But first, I want to give you some context about how we got here, a little history about what we were told happened on that fateful day in 2001. Let's turn to one of the worst websites in the world, arguably one of the worst websites in the world. That website is called Wikipedia, which is state-run propaganda. Here's what Wikipedia allows you to know about that day. Let's roll this. So this is right from their website. The September 11th attacks, commonly known as 9/11, were 4 coordinated suicide terrorist attacks carried out by the militant Islamic extremist network Al-Qaeda against the United States on September 11th, 2001. That morning, 19 terrorists hijacked 4 commercial airliners scheduled to travel from the East Coast to California. The hijackers crashed the first 2 planes into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, which were 2 of the top 5 tallest buildings in the world at the time. Following the first two impacts, the third and fourth flights were similarly coordinated to attack targets in the Washington metropolitan area. The third plane succeeded in crashing into the Pentagon, the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense in Arlington County, Virginia, near the national capital of Washington, D.C. The fourth was intended to strike a federal government building in D.C. itself, but crashed in Stony Creek, Pennsylvania field following a passenger revolt. The attacks killed nearly 3,000 people and instigated the global war on terror. But here's my favorite part that's highlighted there on your screen. Within hours of the attacks, the Central Intelligence Agency determined that Al-Qaeda was responsible. Wow. These CIA guys are great, and they're fast, aren't they? They are super good. How did they figure it out so fast? Well, we must have some sort of intelligence apparatus. We must have the best intelligence apparatus in the world, or maybe was something else going on. Going over these documents.
Indestructible passports, too.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You explain that?
That were just found, like, just right then, like, that same day. Like, oh, here's a passport. Unscathed.
Yeah.
I don't know about this passport thing.
So if you go over these, excuse me, if you go over these documents, going over these documents, sparked a memory for me of an FBI agent admitting on camera to CBS News a few years ago that these 19 hijackers were not working by themselves. No, they were working with people on the inside. I found that video for you. This is an FBI agent. Watch.
Danny Gonzalez was an FBI agent who worked on Operation Encore. He showed us the neighborhood the hijackers lived in before they crashed American Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon. This is Gonzalez's first television interview about the case.
19 hijackers cannot commit 3,000 mass murders by themselves.
Based on what you found, do you believe there was a domestic support network for the hijackers?
Obviously.
No question.
But I can't comment on it, but you don't have to be an FBI agent with 26 years of experience to figure that out.
Oh. So really any idiot could have figured that out.
All right, so we're going to link these things for you now. So what this document now says is that the FBI had been trying to figure out what the connection was between the hijackers and the CIA, and they have been thwarted for years, for decades now. And we're going to see exactly what that connection was. Now, was it that the CIA actually knew what they were going to do, or was it that they were connected to Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia knew what they were going to do? We're going to lay this out. What we know, we're going to maybe figure out why, although why is a big question, right? But we're going to at least figure out what we know and what the intelligence community has been building in terms of brick walls. Now, this recent court filing that was unredacted suggests that the 9/11 hackers, that two of them at least, were working with the CIA. This comes from Donald Canestraro. He's a veteran of the DIA and an investigator for the Office of Military Commissions. The Office of Military Commissions is a court of law for military cases, such as war crimes. Here's where the document where Canestraro tells us what his job is and how he's been looking. He says during the July of 2016, he began this investigation into possible involvement of the Saudi Arabian government and the CIA in the events leading up to the 9/11 attacks. In support of this inquiry, he began to review a discovery provided by the government to the defense and open source materials about Omar al-Bayoumi, a suspected Saudi intelligence officer who had contact with the 9/11 hijackers. These are the two in question that we're going to refer to often, Nawaf al-Hazimi and Khalid al-Midhar. So he conducted these 9/11 interviews, and he noticed that there had been an FBI file on al-Bayoumi released by Judicial Watch, to Judicial Watch by the FBI, pursuant to a FOIA request using a 199 numerical designer designator followed by the letters SD. And he said, most of the time when you see these things, it indicates that the investigation was conducted by the San Diego field office and that there was already a file. So the military court had asked him to investigate and examine if the CIA was working with the Saudi government and if these people had relations. Now, why would they do that? Now, over our break, I was reading up on Scott Horton's book, Enough Already, and he lays out one opinion. Now, this is just an opinion. Why would the CIA and the Saudi government want some kind of 9/11 event? Why would this benefit anybody? He says that Osama bin Laden had been explaining for years before the 9/11 attacks that he had been trying to lure Americans into personally fighting the wars Al-Qaeda members believed the U.S. was already waging against them. They blamed America for the actions of these various proxy forces in the region, primarily the dictatorship in Saudi Arabia and Egypt, as well as the Israeli occupation of Palestine. He says this is just one possible explanation of why, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what we know. So this is conjecture. By providing the American government a crisis to exploit, bin Laden guaranteed that the U.S. would set about accomplishing the terrorist goal for them. Among these were the destabilization of U.S.-supported regimes in the region, religious and political radicalization of populations in Middle Eastern countries, and most importantly, the bankruptcy of the American Treasury with the ultimate goal of forcing the U.S. from the region entirely. So you see the shared goal of increased conflict in the Middle East, that this was Osama bin Laden's goal, and this was also the U.S. goal, and that these two things could be exploited by Saudi intelligence and by the CIA. Now, this is, again, just one possible why, but now let's go to the what. Canestraro says that he spoke to several 9/11 investigators in the FBI who were thwarted from doing their jobs. Now, this is the FBI continuously trying to figure out who were these guys, what was their background, why did they do this, and who helped them. And he has source after source that he speaks to of people saying that they started to get a link about these two hijackers and were stopped. Here is just one investigator. He says, I interviewed another 9/11 commissioner. He numbers his sources, CS1, CS2, all the way down to in the 20s of these people continuing to say the same thing. This second CS2 said that he or she was responsible for the 9/11 Commission's investigation into the possible link between the Saudi government and the 9/11 attacks. And this person noted that the staff director of the 9/11 Commission, Philip Zelikow, limited the number of witnesses that the commission could interview, and recalled that the FBI had Omar al-Bayoumi under investigation prior to the 9/11 attacks, and they said that it was their belief that Omar al-Bayoumi was receiving substantial sums of money from the Saudi embassy in Washington, D.C. prior to the attacks. This source, CS2, recalled that this money was being funneled from the bank accounts at Riggs Bank, belonging to this person, the wife of the Saudi ambassador to the U.S. Now, al-Bayoumi was associated with the Saudi diplomat who worked at the consulate in Los Angeles. Why was he receiving money from the consulate? Well, he says because he was a Saudi intelligence officer who was linked to these two hijackers that we talked about.
And phone
Nawaf
calls.
al-Hazimi and Khalid al-Midar. It's more than phone calls. It's also like, where did he live? What were his jobs? He had several no-show jobs where he was getting paid for jobs that he never did. And the intelligence community knew this.
Well, and yeah, but the phone calls with the hijackers. So, like, if you have no connection with them, why did this then turn up in Operation Encore?
Phone calls as well as dinners in restaurants where they sort of came, went by and sort of looked like a movie, sort of shady reports where it's like, here's a paper and keep going, Jason Bourne style.
Yeah, and this all came out, not all of it. Pieces of this came out in Operation Encore, just like a scraping of it came out in Operation Encore, which was a decades-long investigation by the FBI into any sort of homegrown affiliation or involvement in this attack. This is what, of course, the 9/11 victims' families were demanding for years, was an investigation. And they found, all the Saudis were also involved in this.
Yes. Now, this CS2 source, this is, again, just one of over 20, stated that because of finding this information, they were fired from this Philip Zelikow, who is the head of the 9/11 Commission. The Zelikow in this document that I'm showing you here says that, what they did was a minor security violation, but it was used as a scapegoat to fire them. And CS2 noted, look towards the bottom, that sometime before this termination, Zelikow had blocked the request to conduct interviews and obtain documents pertaining to this inquiry. And then Zelikow seized the index from this person at the time and did not let anyone else on the commission see it. And that CS2, this source, stated that the former deputy staff director of the 9/11 Commission may know where it is currently located. So they're hidden documents. Another source tells Canestraro that they had notified the CIA of the presence of these two hijackers in the U.S. and stated that they were possibly terrorists, and they were told to stand down. And they were told this was not their jurisdiction. In fact, CS3, another source, says that they were told by the CIA not to cooperate in any congressional hearings about the 9/11 Commission. So here is that statement from CS3, stated that before he and his colleagues were interviewed by the 9/11 Commission, they were told by CIA officials that they were not to cooperate fully with congressional investigators. CS3, this source, stated that the justification the CIA used was that the investigators were just looking to hang someone for 9/11. I don't know what kind of justification that seems like. Like, they just want answers, so don't give them answers. They just want to pin it on somebody, so let's not cooperate. Further, here's why CS3 thinks this happened. This is their opinion. It's made clear in the court documents, so let's not all take it to the bank. But CS3, the source, says that he or she believed that the CIA prevented the distribution of these documents because they did not want the FBI interfering with a CIA operation that was being run domestically in violation of U.S. law. CS3 explained that these two terrorists were living in San Diego in 2000 and that Omar al-Bayoumi was working for the Saudi intelligence service when he spoke to these two hijackers in San Diego. According to CS3, al-Bayoumi, this connection that we think is Saudi intelligence, set up bank accounts, rented an apartment for the attackers in San Diego, and that this was done at the behest of the CIA through the Saudi intelligence service. According to this source, prior to the 9/11 attacks, the CIA had been under pressure to recruit informants within al-Qaeda. Responding to this pressure, this person and the colleagues at the CIA were attempting to recruit these two via a liaison relationship with the Saudi intelligence. So the CIA, what they're saying, was wanting to maybe not exploit a war, but instead recruit people inside of al-Qaeda. And they sort of overlooked that these people were then going to go on and do a bigger terrorist attack. Either way, we're not being told the truth, right? Either they did know or they didn't know, but they were, in fact, in contact with these two people for whatever reason, and we're not being told the truth.
Yeah, and there's so many other deep, and this is just one court document that's been unredacted. So that's what we're giving you right here, right? But this, if you tie some of the pieces together from previous statements from both eyewitnesses and people who were on the investigative body of this, who were then sort of pushed out, it all lines up. But it does raise the question, right? We shouldn't be naive. Is this just some sort of a limited hangout? A piece of information to throw us off the track, right? Anytime stories like this come out, I'm always wondering the deeper story here. Like, we're going to get to the Ukraine leaks in just a moment, but what is the deeper thing that we're being led away from? Or is this the Holy Grail? Because there's a lot here that we still haven't touched on. We're not going to talk about it in this episode. I have a whole video that I've been working on, deep research on Flight 93, totally separate from this topic. There's all sorts of discussions, of course, about the buildings in Manhattan and all of that, and what happened to the Pentagon and all sorts of things. So, again, is there something that we're supposed to be being led away from? Like, it's a good question to ask, right? Are we being led by? We give you this, but then the main. See, when I pull back on that, and here's why: no one in the United States media is covering this.
Yes,
no one. And normally, if they wanted us to be led away from something, the New York Times would have this as a front page story. The Washington Post would be covering it. It would be everywhere, right? But there's media silence in the United States on that. So they would be doing the bidding of the deep state.
Yes, it's...
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think it's like parallels. It's like you have so many people, like you have so many of these things that have happened throughout history, and you have people that still are focused on JFK, still are focused on 9/11, still are focused on these things, and they're still doing the fight, and they're bringing out more information. We've already moved past it because we're way up here now. So I think we're just seeing, because I'm seeing a lot of these narratives start to fall apart. Which is good.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the CIA involvement. Exactly.
Yeah.
But as I've been sort of continuing to study, wars in the Middle East, especially, and how the United States picks and chooses who they support in these wars, and usually it is a faction of Al-Qaeda or some kind of offshoot. In fact, these wars in Iraq, like these terrorists could sort of just cross the border into Syria, join al-Nusra, and all of a sudden they're on the U.S. They just switch sides, right? Because the United States is just supporting whoever. It's really willy-nilly. But it does show a parallel between how the United States can use someone until they don't need them any longer, and how that reverberates and has dangerous consequences for everybody, not just Americans, but everybody. When you read about how the United States had a really cozy relationship with Saddam Hussein, and then all of a sudden they needed him to be the bad guy, and they made him the bad guy. Same thing can be said with Bashar al-Assad. And so if we don't follow these parallels and see what the United States has in store for Zelensky, it's a template, right? And it's scary. And so even if you think that you're supporting Ukraine, and you really like Zelensky, then you need to sort of follow this template. Because it's scary what's going to happen when you run out of your use value.
We know how this story ends for Zelensky.
Yeah. Now, I want to go back to the document because in this same vein of U.S. involvement and sort of exploiting the governments that it needs when it can't do so directly, there's this source that's CS7. CS7 is an unnamed investigative journalist for CNN who stated that Israel and Saudi Arabia have acted as proxies for the CIA since the 70s and 80s. CS7 says that there was a group called the Safari Club that was used to block Soviet influence in the Middle East by exchanging intelligence between member nations and engaging in covert action. CS7 stated that the club included the governments of Israel, Saudi Arabia, and other states in the Middle East and North Africa, and that they used this bank to do so. What they were basically doing was doing CIA operations in areas where the CIA could not operate. CS7 told me that Osama Bassan was an informant for the Saudi General Intelligence Directorate. And according to the CNN source CS7, investigation by the FBI immediately following the 9/11 attacks showed that this person was associated with these two hijackers we told you about, Al-Hazmi and Al-Mindar. And so this goes on and on, like I said, through source CS23, admitting that they had knowledge of suspects and links to the CIA and continuously were being told to stop looking where they're looking. Mostly it's the FBI looking into something and the CIA telling them to stop. Now, Senator Robert Graham is also a source, but he is a named source in this report. He says that when he interviewed him in 2016, Senator Graham said this about his time as the co-chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He said he's personally familiar with the workings of both the Senate and House joint inquiry into the events of 9/11, and he acknowledged that the investigation inquiry conducted by the 9/11 Commission said that it was apparent neither the Joint Inquiry nor the 9/11 Commission had fully explored the involvement of the government of Saudi Arabia in the events leading up to the 9/11 attacks, as in they just left it on the floor. They left it on the cutting room floor. Now, this was, of course, congressional investigation. We've learned now that we don't expect much. Congress doesn't have much power except to go on TV and hold hearings that maybe impress you and drop, sort of whatever it is they want us to see. But it does continue to lead to the question, why? Why was the FBI thwarted when they were trying to follow this breadcrumb trail? Why was Congress stopped in its tracks? And what is the CIA not wanting us to see? Yeah. And so we're forced to draw our own conclusions, which is why I gave you sort of these alternate versions of why, but we still really don't know why because we're being told nothing.
Right. And why were they thwarted later? It seems like the narrative was unfolding and certain things were allowed to proliferate. They were allowed to go and detain people for hours in solitary confinement. Remember the 5 Israelis who were caught on camera with I love how they described it, with puzzling behavior after the attacks happened. Puzzling behavior, huh? How did you describe it? Neighbors described it as joy and dancing. But they described it as puzzling behavior, and they were put in solitary confinement by the FBI, and they were questioned for hours upon hours. Like, why were they allowed to do that, right? There's all sorts of weird things that they're allowed to investigate. They're not thwarted at this stuff. If there's certainly involvement from these different governments, there was also questions and reports about Saudi aircraft, Saudi state aircraft being allowed to leave when the entire airspace was shut down. So many more questions, but I love any little nugget of information that pulls a thread that allows us to see a little bit more information here.
Well, it's extremely uncomfortable because it's comfortable to say like, oh, these 9/11, conspiracy theorists, they think this or that or the other. I want to hear what you have to say, Philip, but I just want to say this quickly. On the 20th anniversary of September 11th, I think it was the New York Times did this whole expose about a 9/11 a father of a victim that was on the planes, who went way deep down this rabbit hole and was really convinced that there was something to, the inside job theory. And everyone just treated him like a crazy person. And she didn't validate his questions. She didn't, continue to ask the questions that he had unanswered. It was just like, look at this sad man who cannot get over it 20 years later because of his son. And it got to the point where his wife was like, they would go to a dinner party and be like, please don't bring up 9/11. I just can't have this be a part of our every social interaction, even though it was their son who had died. And so it's more comfortable to treat this as a conspiracy theory than it is to look at all the gaping holes. Go ahead, Philip, please.
Oh yeah, I was going to say that's one of the benefits of getting to investigate yourself is that you already know what you don't want to find, and so it's a lot easier to not find it when you already know what you're looking to obfuscate.
Right.
I was just kind of like,
Yeah, exactly. You know how to divert the questions really quickly. We see that all the time when someone asks an uncomfortable question at a public event, of a politician. And the crowd's like, oh, no, and they all just kind of divert attention to something else.
Well, I'm extremely uncomfortable with this because of the way it's so like mainstream labeled as conspiracy.
Right. Oh, you're a crackpot for questioning anything about that day.
Yeah.
You can't question anything about Flight 93. Well, I'm from Pennsylvania. There's a lot of questions about Flight 93, which we're doing a whole deep dive redacted history about. So you'll see that video soon.
Nice.
And there's a lot of questions about the Manhattan buildings. There's a lot of questions about the Pentagon. There's so many other questions about the involvement of the Saudis and Israel. And so you go down many, many rabbit holes on this. But anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts and comments on this in the comments below. We've got a lot more news to get to on this first day back from our flu vacation, our flu vacation.
It was a vacation with a flu extension.
With a flu stamp. Stamp of flu approval. Excuse me. So we're going to talk about the leaks in Ukraine, and it's not just the leaker, the 21-year-old leaker. No, Seymour Hersh has his hands on some deep information that's equally troubling. Also, Politico has their leaks in the bag as well. And why is one particular leaker being vilified when these other news publications get to have access to leakers all the time and build a business upon it, right? That's how the Washington Post made its money. We'll get to that. We're also going to look at the new international digital currency, which has just quietly rolled out. This happened about a week ago. We'll go through all of that and more. But first, if you look at what's happening, this on Friday, we got news from the Fed, of course, that inflation numbers, inflation data, softer than expected, which means that we are now in for possible rate cuts, according to the futures markets, by July. And that means, as the Fed has projected, a recession, massive recession. We've been saying that here on the show for quite some time. And the one way to protect yourself right now is with precious metals, making sure that at least a portion of your portfolio, in my opinion, is in precious metals and gold. It's totally up to you how you invest your money. But Natali and I personally have a lot invested in gold and silver because it's sustained for 5,000 years. 5,000 years, right? So we have it. You buy the gold bars, gold coins. You can do it simply, and you can do it inside of an IRA, so it can grow tax-free growth inside of an IRA. And our friends at Lear Capital can help you get set up with that. And right now at Lear Capital, if you call the 1-800 number on the screen right there, it's 1-800-613-3557, 1-800-613-3557, or go to LearRedacted.com. You can get a free gold kit, a free investor's guide. And also, right now, they're running a promotion where when you buy 1 ounce of gold, you get a free ounce of silver as well. And if you pay attention to what's happening in the silver markets, the demand for silver is off the charts. It's in every component, in every phone, in every electronic device. It's not only a currency, it's also an element that we need to run all of our electronics. So it's very, very important. So you need to check this out as an option. Check out their gold kit, their precious metals leader. Lear Capital has been doing this for a number of years. They are fantastic, and we stand by them. They're really great. So go to LearRedacted.com or call their 1-800 number, 1-800-613-3557. At least think about or have a discussion with them about possibly taking, even if it's just a few $100 or a few $1,000 and converting that to actual real tangible things, unlike the euro, unlike the US dollar, but putting it into precious metals to protect your family. And it's not really about appreciation. To me, it's about just wealth preservation. Like, okay, great, it goes up a little bit in value. Gold is projecting to hit all-time highs. That's great. If it goes up a few $100 in value, that's wonderful per ounce. Again, that's not why I buy gold. I really buy it just to lock it in like a vault, like to protect it, because the US dollar continues to go and lose value. Why do you want your family's future tied to that? I just can't wrap my head around why you would. So anyway, check them out. And if it's for you, great. So thank you so much. Someone in the chat earlier, said, the title of the show scared me. And, well, we have to attack, get your attention. We're competing against billions of videos on YouTube, by the way. But I chose the title today, "Oh shit, it's starting again," as kind of a play on, there's a lot of shit starting right now that's actually happening in the news, but also our show is starting again.
Oh, I got it. It's a guess who's back.
Yes, exactly.
Back again. Gotcha.
So hope you weren't offended by it. If you can deal with it, we're all adults here. So it's starting again. The show's starting again.
Yeah. All right.
You
doing okay?
I think I'm good. How's everyone doing in the chat tonight? I've got a little stretch here. You guys doing okay in the chat?
Yeah, they don't talk out loud.
Yeah.
But I see they're saying. Yes, they're fine. They're good. They're good. Yeah. All right. We're going to talk about the war in Ukraine. Are you ready for that?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's talk about that. So here's a question. Has the Biden administration been lying to you about the Ukraine war? Well, it turns out not just a little bit, but a lot. Maybe a better question to ask, though, is how badly has the Biden administration been lying to you about the Ukraine war? I guess like on a scale, like a sliding scale.
Like how long is the Pinocchio nose?
Right. We already know, we know it grows, but how long is it?
I read a quote this weekend in the book that I just told you about, the Scott Horton book, that the first lie you tell in war is to yourself, which is great. It's a great quote, right? Because if you're supporting war of any kind, thinking that another human being has to die to solve a conflict, you're telling yourself something that most human nature fundamentally does not believe.
Exactly. That's a great one. So to hear the Biden administration tell a story about the Ukraine war, tell the story. Ukraine is moments away from a big spring offensive. They're going to topple Putin. They're going to retake Crimea, and democracy will be saved, thanks to a bunch of recent Pentagon document leaks and new reporting last week by journalist Seymour Hersh. We know the opposite is actually true. We know that Ukraine is the most corrupt government in Europe. Ukraine has been stealing millions of dollars from you, U.S. taxpayers. That's undeniable now. And the documents show Ukraine cannot win this war. And further, U.S. troops are in Ukraine and have been. Now we have confirmation of this beyond just some leaks from government officials. No, it's in the Pentagon's documents. We know this to be true. But other than all of that bad news, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the theater last night? Was it still good? Were the actors any good? Well, it turns out even the acting in this war has been awful.
If the freedom to dream were a spear, I proudly present a human being who tonight represents that spear's most honed tip.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants of the 80th Golden Globe Award ceremony, the award was won at a special time.
Awful. Awful. So even the acting.
I mean, did you hear how low the applause actually was? It really wasn't as much as you would think. Like, oh no.
Yeah, that was the famous "just the tip" speech.
So
who's the butt of the spear of willingness to dream or whatever he said? I want to know who the other end of that is.
The butt.
I mean, the American people are right now.
The American taxpayers are the butt.
Yeah, because once you hear what I'm about to tell you, you're going to feel that way. So bend over. So over the past few days, something we've never seen before started happening. The American news media, specifically the Washington Post, started revealing the identity of the 21-year-old U.S. military airman who leaked the Pentagon documents in an online forum. And that's not just surprising given that the Washington Post, of course, is an arm of the CIA. But what is surprising is how quickly the arrest came. Ostensibly, the CIA gives the Washington Post his identity. They write a story about it. And then within 24 hours, he's arrested. That's how this works. Here's the video of 21-year-old airman Teixeira being hauled out and walked backwards towards us and handcuffed and marched away. If that's not amazing enough, the Washington Post doing the bidding of the CIA, a New York Times reporter then publishes a tweet saying, "See, this wouldn't have happened if the leaker had given us documents. We could have protected his identity here at the New York Times." Almost like a threat. Hey, because you published these on a Discord forum, that's not the New York Times, because you published them there, instead of calling us over at the New York Times, the bastion of journalism, this is what you get. You get arrested. Let that be a lesson to all of you future whistleblowers out there trying to keep us out of World War III. Don't just push this on a Discord forum. Call the New York Times. Don't publish this yourself on your Substack. Give it to the team at Redacted. No. You need to talk to the New York Times to have your identity protected. So Biden administration's John Kirby says the American people have no right to know the information that this guy leaked to you. Watch.
This is information that has no business in the public domain. It has no business, if you don't mind me saying, on the pages of front pages of newspapers or on television.
Oh, really?
Because it undermines our ability to lie to you about the lie in Ukraine.
Who do these assholes think they work for? I mean, seriously, like, we have no right. It's like we are who gives you the right.
They know who they work for. They don't work for you, and they don't work for me. They work for the deep state and the military-industrial complex.
They work for weapons.
I saw a great political cartoon this weekend, which showed a whole bunch of tables set up, and there was each table was like a person sitting there, and it said healthcare, and the person had an empty plate. It was like people waiting at a restaurant. They were all sitting there with empty plates, like waiting for the waiter to come around. And all of these little tables, healthcare, schools, education, like all of these things were empty, right? And then the one table that had all the fat cats, and there was just coins and dollars pouring over the table, was the military and military-industrial complex. They know exactly who they work for.
But here you see two major establishments being decapitated, the mainstream media and the military-industrial complex. And they're both now working together to help each other keep their heads on, right? So the military is saying you didn't need to know this, and it undermines our ability to use the press to tell you what we want you to know. And you see the media saying it should have come through us. It undermines the lies we want to repeat from the military establishment. So therefore, we need to undermine the sources. So then we will make their lives unsafe because it pulled the rug out from the both of us. The both of us are in bed together. We don't like that, so we're going to punish the whistleblowers.
Right. And it is interesting, right? Because if we're holding this guy to this standard, this 21-year-old, right? This is the new standard now, where the CIA outs you in the newspaper to the Washington Post, then they swoop in and arrest you. Should we also then arrest the sources who leaked information in Seymour Hersh's latest report? So Seymour Hersh out with his new jaw-dropping article.
Well, let's just, before we get to this for a second, remember a couple years ago, there was this big whistleblower who went to the New York Times to talk about how Donald Trump was just a big baby. That was the whole story. Just that Trump was a baby. There's no adults in the room. He doesn't read his briefings, and he eats nothing but fast food.
Right.
And it was someone who said they were senior in the administration. I'm going to the New York Times to let you know that he's not an adult. He's not capable of making decisions, and he doesn't pay attention, and he doesn't study, basically. And the New York Times went to bat to protect this person, this senior source, and they swore that this was in the public interest for us to know that he's a baby, that he's immature and he's a baby, basically, right? And so look at how the entire establishment got behind that whistleblower. Wasn't outed, wasn't arrested, worked inside the cabinet, presumably. I don't think we ever did know. We had some conjecture about it. That's in the public domain, according to this establishment. Mm-hmm. But this, that we are being led into war with lies, is not.
Right. No, that's Trump being a baby or not wanting to hear what you have to say in a meeting is arguably more important.
Yes.
Like that's what they're telling us.
That he likes
eating McDonald's. I like eating McDonald's.
Far more people are dying because of these lies and these leaks than just Trump being immature and being a baby. I think that it's pretty easy to quantify that argument.
Yeah, I would think so. So let's play that same scenario out with the Seymour Hersh article then, which just dropped a few days ago. His jaw-dropping article points out how the CIA knows that Ukraine has been embezzling tens of millions of dollars from U.S. taxpayers, stealing from the money that we've been sending. They're aware of this. They know it, actively know it. It's not like they can just play dumb or cognitive dissonance here. Hersh has this nugget in his article, quote, "What is also unknown," when he means what is also unknown, he means like, we don't know this because it's not been publicized or released in the press. What is also unknown, he writes, is that Zelensky has been buying the fuel from Russia, the country with which it and Washington are at war. And the Ukrainian president and many in his entourage have been skimming untold millions from the American dollars earmarked for diesel fuel payments. One estimate by analysts from the Central Intelligence Agency puts the embezzled funds at $400 million last year, at least. Another expert compared the level of corruption in Kiev as approaching that of the Afghan war, although there will be no professional audit reports from the Ukraine war. Zelensky's been buying discount diesel from the Russians, one knowledgeable American intelligence official told me. And who's paying for the gas and oil? We are. Putin and his oligarchs are making millions on it, he said. Wow. Excellent journalist Glenn Greenwald joined Howard Kurtz yesterday to talk about these leaked papers. And I always love his take on how the media's response is to these types of reports. Watch Glenn's reaction when Howard Kurtz asks him if the Washington Post has a legitimate news story here for having revealed the name of this 21-year-old, have outed him. Like, does the Washington Post, isn't this in the public interest? Now, I know Howie Kurtz is a very smart man. I used to work with him for many years. I think what he's doing is He already knows how Glenn's probably going to answer this question. He's giving him a great question here. So isn't this in the public interest? The Washington Post says it's in the public interest to reveal this leaker, this Pentagon leaker. Watch Glenn's reaction.
The day before the arrest of Jack Teixeira, the Washington Post reported that the documents were posted by a young gun enthusiast who worked for the military on Cape Cod, shared his stuff with a chat group, and you accused the paper of doing the bidding of the U.S. security state. Isn't it a legitimate news story?
No, it's the job of the FBI to catch people who leak classified information. As a journalist, those are the people we cultivate. Those are the people we rely on to do our jobs. Every single day, Howie, the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC News, Fox has stories along the lines of senior officials told us X, Y, and Z, and they claim that this information is classified. The difference here is that this person didn't give this material to the New York Times or the Washington Post, and so bizarrely, they went on a hunt to find him and out him, and even the New York Times military reporter said, although he deleted it, ironically, if he had given the documents to the New York Times, we'd be doing everything to protect his identity instead of exposing him. I think it's incredibly bizarre for media corporations to unearth sources and leakers.
Well, that's the paradox, but let me just sort of test this here. Are there no leakers who you would say it's legitimate for the press to try to expose? I mean, what if it was somebody who was anti-American and wanted to jeopardize military people? What if it was somebody who took money from a foreign country to expose nuclear secrets?
Right, but the irony here is that the New York Times and the Washington Post in particular have been using these documents from the very beginning to do all kinds of reporting, which means implicitly they recognize these documents as being newsworthy and journalistically valuable. This is not a case where, say, troop movements or the names of covert agents overseas was disclosed. The government always claims people are endangered when their secrets get out that they don't want leaked. That's not this case. The fact that we're all talking about the contents of these materials proves that they're journalistically newsworthy in the eyes of the same media outlets that tracked him down.
Right. Yeah, there's maybe like one or two circumstances where I think maybe that if you're a news organization and you get a call from a government official to not publish something, that would be, hey, today is June 5th. I heard that you got some information that tomorrow on June 6th, we're going to be launching a little something we call D-Day. We'd really love for you to not publish that. If you could just be so kind.
Yeah,
because a lot of Americans will die if they think that we're actually landing at Calais instead of this other spot, not at Calais, right? Like, can you just hold off on that? Give it 48 hours. And I promise you, maybe we'll give you a good one-on-one interview with Ike,
sure,
after that.
Yeah.
That maybe, or... yeah, that's about it. Like that maybe, or troop movements that would literally lead to the death of thousands upon thousands of people. But this?
No, they do the opposite. In fact, again, the book I was reading, Scott Horton's book, showed that the media had exculpatory evidence that the lie about the Iraq War and troops on the border of Kuwait was in fact a lie, because they had intelligence from satellites from the Soviet Union at the time. And the media decided not to follow up on that story and not to publish it, and to go forward with the Bush administration's lies about the attack on Kuwait in order to attack Iraq. Mm-hmm. They do the opposite of that.
Yeah.
The frustrating thing is, like, if you watch the mainstream, all you're seeing is them go after this kid. If you watch, like, our sources and stuff, everybody's going after the information. Like, this is important information. It's like, and I'm waiting for the narrative to come down that somehow this is linked to Russia.
Well, I just saw in the chat, one person, Linux Master, there's always one, right? Drops a chat. He says, do you guys have dual citizenship in Russia? I just laughed my ass off. I've never been to Russia. I would actually love to visit Russia sometime, but I've never been there. And no, we do not have dual citizenship anywhere. So no, we don't.
But it tracks with a lot of the reporting that we've been doing here about how the United States is feeding us lies in order to support the conflict in Ukraine, and making us somehow forget that Ukraine was attacking the Donbass since 2014. We've known this because we've been reading about it, and we remember, and we don't just get social media cred for putting Ukraine flags up all around our show. But, I guess this might be surprising to anyone who's been sort of blindly supporting the U.S. narrative.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, we were in the airport, Gatwick Airport. There was a young man who worked at an electronics store, and me in electronics, I was hanging out there while we were waiting for our flight. And he saw my camera, and he was talking to me about vlogging and video stuff. He's like, "Oh, do you do any videos and photos and stuff?" And he was a great photographer, and we were chatting. And I said, "Oh, you have a YouTube channel?" And we cover geopolitics, and the Rumble channel we cover geopolitics. And then he's like, "Oh, what's your channel?" He looked it up, and he goes, "Dude," he goes, "this is not a small channel." And I'm like, "Well, thank you. I appreciate that." And he said, "I can't believe how many people don't know what's going on in Ukraine, the truth about it." He's like, "People don't know to look back to 2014. And I was like, "Yes, young man, like there's a bright future. Like, that's awesome." He's like, "My dad told me, to really do my homework and understand like what happened in 2014 in Ukraine, to understand that this is a U.S. led proxy war." And that like, yes, there are smart people out there.
Yeah.
Who just spend a little bit of time reading books,
It goes back to the 80s and the 70s, like the whole Cold War. Like, it's all related. It's like one long continuous drama, and so it's like all these little bits thrown in there, but you can keep tracking this back to World War II.
Yes. Yeah, you're right about that.
And good luck finding a kid that age in this country that would have that conversation.
No, I see those videos in Times Square where they interview people. They ask them who the vice president of the United States is, and they can't answer it. So anyway, Glenn Greenwald also draws a direct connection to the famous Pentagon Papers, which showed just how the U.S. war in Vietnam was never going to end in victory for the United States, but the U.S. government continued to lie to the American people straight to our faces how it was doing in Vietnam. This is a great parallel. Watch.
The leaked material says Ukraine is in a much more vulnerable position in fighting the Russians in terms of vulnerability, running low on ammo, than the Biden administration has publicly proclaimed. Does that bring to mind the old Vietnam War phrase, credibility gap?
Yeah, I mean, remember, the reason Daniel Ellsberg leaked the Pentagon Papers was because the U.S. government was telling American people that they were winning the war in Vietnam, but privately they were saying there was no way for them to win. The most they could hope for was a stalemate, and he felt compelled to show the truth. Very similar in terms of what the documents reveal, and that it not only shows the Ukrainians losing, at least more so than the government admits, but also that the U.S. government has special forces deployed on the ground in Ukraine, which I think is something, if we're going to do, we should at least know about first.
Yeah, I do think we should deal with.
Imagine that, right? Wouldn't that be great to know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of us did, right?
Right.
we kind of been pointing that out for, ever since it started. So,
but guys,
I think we brought it up about a year ago.
Yeah. So guys, I'll just sort of ask you here. I'll throw this out as like a collective question for everyone here in the chat. Everyone can comment and leave us a comment as well. Like, is this the new standard then for mainstream media journalism and whistleblowers? Like, when we hear information that we know to be very important to the American people, in the best interest of the American people, we've been lied to about a war in Ukraine, about money that's being wasted, that a war that's not going to be winnable, by the way. U.S. troops in that country, wouldn't that be nice to know? U.S. troops in that country, you've been lying to us, lying to our faces about that. And by no reporters in the press corps seem to ask that question, right? Why do they never ask that question? Or specific troop numbers? Like, can you please tell us? Like, we were told no American troops were going to be in this war. Why are there American troops in Ukraine?
Right.
Is this the future of journalism now, where we're going to out whistleblowers in newspapers?
Unless they just have something to say about Donald Trump being a baby.
Yeah, I guess.
In which case we protect them, life and limb.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, according to like modern journalism, though, that's not a journalistic question, because you're not supposed to know that. So they can't ask those questions because they're not supposed to know about it to begin with.
I suppose.
So you can't ask follow-ups because the Pentagon say, well, you shouldn't know that. So don't talk about it.
Yeah. Well, we've got more news to get to here on your Monday.
Well, I do want to just point this out, though, because I think it's interesting to talk about how Russia is responding to these leaks and what is the substance of the leaks. So what we do continue to learn from them is just how deeply involved the U.S. is in this war and how badly it's going. For example, this, according to Politico, is that Russia is jamming U.S. smart bombs in Ukraine. The documents do say, and they were corroborated, that American-made smart bombs are falling victim to Russian electronic jamming in Ukraine, causing them to miss the targets. This sort of means that despite Zelensky's promise that his army doesn't really know what they're doing, he says they do, but they don't. Says the weapons have experienced higher than expected dud rates and have missed their targets on the battlefield, according to this source from a U.S. official. Now, another official says, of course, that they think it's just that, like, it's not the problem with the Ukrainian army or the missiles themselves, which we have been reporting that the equipment's not great. It's faulty, it's old, and the Ukrainian government doesn't know what to do with it. No, they said instead it's Russia jamming the missiles, which makes me want to make a baseball reference, but this is serious, so I won't. Now, you would think that Russia would be kind of happy about this validation because it shows what they've been saying all along. The U.S. is involved. The U.S. is provoking this. The U.S. is preventing peace. But Russian expert Gilbert Doctorow, author of the book Does Russia Have a Future?, reports that Russia is not at all happy about this. Here's how he puts it. Says the Russians are not at all pleased with this situation. It strengthens the argument on their side by those who say that insanity rules the USA, that you have to be prepared for every eventuality in escalation of the war, which just shows that there's no fun in saying, I told you so, when you realize that your enemy is as ruthless and as crazy as the Joker.
Yeah, you just want to see it all burn.
Which is our side, right? Like, we're the crazy ones, guys. And so, like, you know, instead of arguing about who the leakers are, we need to argue about the substance and say, people are dying here. Maybe we're not for this.
You know, it's like when you look at the Nord Stream pipeline that the United States blew up, like everyone like jumped and said, oh, it was Russia, right? And Russia just sat back and said, clearly it wasn't us. We call for an international investigation. There were U.S. ships in that area at the time. Please look it up. It wasn't us. Why would we blow up our own pipeline? You would think that a terrorist attack of that size would... How does the United States respond to terrorist attacks? Yeah. Right? We saw that in Iraq, right? So we know how we respond in that situation. What has Russia done to respond to the Nord Stream pipeline attack? They've asked for an international investigation by the UN. And
that
the UN
voted it down.
And the UN voted it down.
Yeah. So
that's crazy.
Yes, crazy.
They went batshit crazy.
We're the crazy uncles of the world right now.
I love Dogfather 1968 on Rumble says he calls those smart missiles tilapia missiles. I don't know why, it just made me laugh. Tilapia missiles. They're not smart. Get it. Well, they're not smart missiles. They're just like, I don't know, they're like flopping around. Like, I don't know. Just the image made me laugh.
Okay. It's like a filler fish.
Yeah, like a filler fish. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. It just made me laugh.
Alrighty then. Okay.
Anyway.
Well, we're going to move on to talk about a new digital currency. And then we're going to talk about this new United Nations report that says everyone should be able to abuse minors and also poop on the street. It's crazy.
Oh, I mean, like San Francisco.
Exactly like San Francisco. They want us all to live in a town like San Francisco where people live in tents. And did you know in San Francisco, there were so many homeless people peeing on street lamps that they had to replace thousands of them because one was peed on so much that it fell on a car.
It corroded and fell on
a car. That's what the UN thinks is a great society to live in. So we're going to get to that as well. This story will blow your mind. Sorry, blowing my mind. But first, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Bank on Yourself. Do you really control your retirement money? Well, if you've got a 401k or an IRA, you don't. That is a way for you to partner with the government to invest in the stock market. And they decide on how much you borrow, when you pay it back, what you pay it when you withdraw. You'll owe taxes and penalties just for taking your money out too soon or waiting too long, even though it's your money. And with soaring national debt, who knows how much you'll have to pay in taxes when you withdraw at full retirement. Could it even last 30 years? In fact, by most estimates, most IRAs are gone within 10 years. Now, there's a better way to grow your nest egg with Bank on Yourself. It's a guaranteed and predictable way to grow your hard-earned money. The retirement plan alternative gives you 100% control of your money plus tax-free income in retirement because you'll know what your tax rate is in retirement. It will be zero under current tax law, which protects you from the coming tax tsunami. Plus, you're in control, unlike a Roth IRA or a 401k. With Bank on Yourself, you get access to your money for any purpose at any time with no questions asked and no government penalties or restrictions on how much income you take when you take it back. Bank on Yourself is the strategy from famous businesses like McDonald's, used when no banker would lend them a dime, Disney as well. Almost anyone can do it, and it's built-in inflation protection. Your money is guaranteed to grow by a larger dollar amount every single year in both good times and bad. So you can get a free report with all the details on how Bank on Yourself strategy adds guarantees, predictability, tax savings, and control to your financial plan. Just go to bankonyourself.com/redacted. That's bankonyourself.com/redacted. One more time, bankonyourself.com/redacted.
All right. Well, let's talk about what's happening. Something big is happening right now to Western currencies. I don't know if you've been following the news. You probably haven't been, because no one's been covering this story. The Western media is ignoring this story about what's happening to Western currencies. No coverage in the Wall Street Journal. No coverage in the Financial Times. No coverage in Bloomberg. All of these publications purport to cover financial news. What could be, arguably one of the biggest stories in 100 years is getting radio silence. They're getting no coverage whatsoever. I don't understand. Maybe you can help me figure this out. Maybe you can help us understand why there's no coverage of this story in the mainstream media. Drop us a comment below. Oddly, this story is being suppressed everywhere. So this week, unbeknownst to almost no one, a shady group of globalist elites, people, I didn't even know this group, to be honest with you, who run our monetary system, very quietly rolled out the new way that you will bank and pay for goods. Do you know these guys? We'll get to them in a second. Where you'll buy your meat, your eggs, buy your gas, your petrol. All of these things will now be functionally controlled by this group. This is how you will invest with this new digital currency infrastructure. The only reason we even know about this is thanks to a press release that they put out, issued by this shady group of people. And it happened last week right under our noses during spring break, I guess, when everyone was not really paying attention. So let's go through how crazy this is and what this will lead to. We've been warning about this for a long time on this channel, and you're starting to see a lot of the pieces come into place now. 2 weeks ago, we told you about how the Fed Now program is rolling out, right? That just began. That will wrap up in July, they say. So those pieces are starting to come into place there for central bank digital currency in the United States. We've already seen CBDCs being rolled out in other countries as well. But this is the umbrella CBDC that would go over all of them. So last week, the DCMA announced through a press release the rollout of a new international CBDC. Stay with me here, and I'll try to read this. Sorry, I've still got the flu, so if I take a deep breath, I cough. This is crucial. Here's their press release. I'm going to try to read a dry press release.
I'll read the first part so that you can take a break. Today at the International Monetary Fund Spring Meetings 2023, the Digital Currency Monetary Authority announced their official launch of an international central bank digital currency that strengthens the monetary sovereignty of participating central banks and complies with the recent crypto asset policy recommendations proposed by the IMF. This universal monetary unit, symbolized as ANSI character, it's like a U with an umlaut,
right?
I guess, is legally a monetary commodity, can transact in any legal tender, settlement, currency, and functions like a CDBC to enforce. That's all we got.
I love First Love Ya in our chat on YouTube says, yes, everyone say no, 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 hell no, stand up to this. Yeah, absolutely. We need to be able to stand up to this because it's going to get worse here, as I explain. So what the hell? Who is the DCMA? Who are these people?
Is this this shady group, also pro-Ukrainian by chance?
Oh, absolutely they are. In fact, Citibank was on a panel. I mean, yes, all of these guys who want to profit massively from an infusion of capital inside of Ukraine, absolutely tied to this, right? I don't know that they're tied to crypto and FTX and all that stuff, but I'm telling you, anybody who's in a Western-aligned government right now absolutely is tied to this. And that's all you need to know right there. So who the hell are these guys, this shady group, the DCMA, that's now working with the IMF to govern all of our financial transactions? Turns out, according to their press release, they're a secretive group of, quote, sovereign states, central banks, commercial and retail banks, and other financial institutions. Is that sufficiently vague for you? We already know the IMF picks winners and losers when it decides who gives its loans to, right? Right? I mean, think about how the IMF does this in Africa, right?
Yes.
Can you speak on that a little bit?
Well, what do you mean exactly? Sorry, do you want me to...
I needed a water break, but you did a whole story on this last year on how the IMF ferrets out different loans, and we covered it here on the show. But sorry for throwing you under the bus. Anyway,
I have to review my notes.
Let me go back to Natalie's story from a year ago. So the International Monetary Fund likes to decide how much money they're going to give out to countries, poor countries in Africa and otherwise, based on your, I don't know, social credit worthiness, basically. So, you're going to create a new coal-powered plant? Sorry, we're not going to give you loans for that. But if you're going to build a solar farm here in Africa, sure, we'll give you loans that will enable your growth in Africa for that. But wait a second. You're asking me to skip our entire industrial revolution? You guys got to do it in Germany and America. You guys got to use fossil fuels to build your economy. Why can't we in Africa do what you guys did? Because we're better than you. And now you need to act like us. So you can only use wind and solar. And then you can get your loans. And then you can be indebted to us for decades to come.
Yeah, you can't deforest up to, 70%. Only Germany can do that.
Right. Go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, well, not to mention, not only that, but the IMF is notorious for, they give like loans to poorer countries that they know can't afford to pull them back so that they can basically take control of their government as like, they're basically like, you have to do austerity measures because you have to pay us this back. So they use those loans as a de facto, like, almost a coup. Like they just, that way they can control the government of these other countries.
And when we ran the story, of course, we did the story as it related to Ukraine, right? Because the IMF loans that we were giving to Ukraine, the International Monetary Fund were giving to Ukraine was basically like, here you go, here's your money, but we control you now. Like we're the money fathers. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I was just going to compare it to The Godfather. It's like they're sitting there like, we're going to give you this money, but we may come calling for a favor.
Yeah.
It's like
our favor. Our favor will be that we will take over your country. That's the favor that we will need. Yeah. So we already know that the IMF picks winners and losers, and then it decides who it gives loans to. So sovereign governments are behind this. So central banks are behind this. Big banks are behind this. Yes, a group of unelected globalists are behind this. Do we have names? No, we don't, because they're operating in the shadows. As journalist Michael Snyder says, quote, basically, it sounds like a secretive cabal of international banks and national governments is conspiring to push this new currency down our throats. Yes, exactly. And here it is. Here it is. They're calling it the Universal Monetary Unit. And here it is. It's Unicoin. Unicoin. This is what it will look like. Well, it's not going to look like this because it's fake. It doesn't exist, right? It's not an actual physical currency. Like it's not actual gold or silver. It's fake. So, and it will work. Basically, it's been designed to work in tandem with the US dollar, in tandem with the euro, etc. But of course, it has ultimate power. It sits over top of this in this structure. And we'll learn more about how all of these things interconnect in time. But this is just the preliminary rollout of this. So imagine all of these little currencies will now report up to the mothership like a science fiction film. Here's the mothership and all of these little euros and dollars and whatever other currencies exist out there. Do any other ones exist anymore? They'll all kind of report up to that, and that's how it will that's how it will work. The U.S. and right now, this is exactly how the international CBDC will facilitate these transactions. We don't know yet. I mean, we don't exactly know how they're going to facilitate these transactions. Are they going to use a debit card, or will it be on your phone? Like, okay, I want to make a purchase. I want to transfer money. I want to buy a house. I want to enroll my kids in tennis lessons or college, or I don't know, buy a Netflix subscription, or what the hell else do people want to buy and enjoy their lives with, right? How is it going to work? We don't know. Will it be on your phone? Probably not. Will you have a plastic debit card? Probably not. No, remember Professor Richard Werner told us how this will work and what this control will do to all of us. Watch.
Also, they never talk about the nature of this CBDC. What is it actually going to look like? They never talk about that. Right. But I heard one European central banker tell me what it's going to look like. He saw it. He was invited to one of the old central banks in Europe that are very much promoting this. And they showed him. And, he's a top, executive director of another central bank in Europe. And there's no reason to believe that he was telling me a story. And he was around this large and would be implanted under your skin. So that is the plan.
Right.
And of course, that has other implications on top of what we've mentioned, on top of the control aspects, because that actually enters your body. In my view, violates human dignity, and can be then used for even in terms of functionality beyond the monetary and economic transaction purposes. So highly dangerous, and definitely something we have to oppose. And so using cash is one of the things we can do to make sure that the hurdle will be higher for the central planners to introduce the CBDC.
Now that's the great question, right? Because I'm a big advocate of cash. And so anytime I get a chance to go to the ATM, I do. And I take out the maximum amount that I can every time that I do. And then, store it in different spots and in safes and so forth, and make sure that it's secure. And I want to make sure that is, my hope is, that's a great question for Catherine Austin Fitts and others is, well, what if they just say, we're not accepting that anymore at all? Like, it's no good. We don't recognize it anymore.
Yeah.
And your paper is not worth the money.
To the silver
paper is printed on.
Yeah, what were those silver notes or whatever that during I can't remember, those silver certificates, those just became invalid?
Yeah.
And people had purchased them?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
In Portugal, they only just stopped accepting the old Portuguese monetary currency. And the euro is, how old is the euro now? 20, 30 years, right? And so they gave that long to turn in the currency, like a really long runway to say, from now on, we will no longer accept that, to turn it in for a euro. So you would think that in sort of a kinder society, you would get at least a certain amount of time. But it doesn't seem like now there's any appetite for doing anything like that. It's like let's just rip the Band-Aid and force people into a system that they don't want.
Yeah. President Biden, in the White House right now, because think about it, they're trying to eliminate financial freedom. That's the goal of this, right? They don't want you to have financial freedom because they want total control of everything you do.
Yes.
They don't want you to own anything. You will own nothing and you'll be happy about it because they will control the entire flow from soup to nuts. Your ability to use cash, the White House is already spinning this on their website as a glorious thing. Like, hey, you don't need any of that. We got it. Listen to this lofty language on the White House's website. President Biden often summarizes his vision for America in one word: possibilities. A digital dollar may seem far-fetched, but modern technology could make it a real possibility. If the U.S. pursued a CBDC, there could be many possible benefits, such as facilitating efficient growth and low-cost transactions, fostering greater access to the financial system, boosting economic growth, and supporting the continued centrality of the U.S. within the international financial system. So let me get this right. Right now, we are $33 trillion in debt. And the U.S. dollar is losing prestige as the world's reserve currency. But let's take away the physical paper and the coins, and that'll somehow boost economic growth? Like, where does this logic come from? On what merit will we suddenly be boosting economic growth because we've eliminated now all physical representations of money? We got rid of gold in the 70s. Now we're going to get rid of cash and coins. So now it's literally, you'll never see cash. It'll just be a figment of your imagination. The money will just not even exist.
I mean, it makes certain sense to me in the fact that, like, if you think about who actually has cash, it's not the top 90% wealth earners. It's the bottom 10%. Those are the people using cash. because the billionaires aren't running around with a bunch of cash in their pockets.
In fact,
It's just all
billionaires
assets
probably would
and all
have
like digital money.
They probably would have a harder time accessing their cash.
Yeah, they just use the black card, American Express.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of
all
jokes.
Your wealth is
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say that if all your wealth is in assets, and it's not like you're sitting on a pile of actual cash, this is the last way to hurt the remaining, like those people that are still kind of at the bottom. And that's why they want to rush it so bad, because then they get all of it.
Yeah. So I really am curious how having a lot of extra cash, I subscribe to the idea, I do it, but I'm hoping that this will slow the move to this and maybe even prevent it from happening by us using cash, refusing to use these digital currencies in that way. Maybe that will happen. They say that, of course, your life will be so much easier if it's centralized, everything is digital, but it's all about control. And when this is officially rolled out, you'll have no choice. Your financial privacy will be toast. You want to pay the 14-year-old babysitter with cash? Nope. Want to tip the driver with cash? Nope. Sorry, that's not going to happen. These globalists will be able to track everything you do. Remember when the Obama administration used the IRS to go after conservative political action groups in Ohio? Yeah, that happened. The financial targeting of political opponents. So tell me this won't happen. Tell me this is not going to be used for political advantage. I'll laugh right in your face about it.
Just look how long they've been programming us to not use cash. I mean, the whole debit card thing and all that came out. I mean, since that started, we have been programmed not to use cash. I very rarely have cash on me.
Yeah, everything's contactless now, right? And they push it at all these different stores and government buildings.
Your phone.
Yeah, government buildings and national parks now have gone cashless. So they're already doing it at government offices. Like you can't, I want to pay with an American dollar to go to Mount Rainier with my family for the day? No, we don't accept American currency anymore. You have to use cashless payments. Like what?
Well, and think about the biggest inconvenience to us lately has been we don't get our money back when we go buy something. We don't like it. We take it back. We got to wait 3 to 5 business days. Now they've got a way. We've already been trained not to use cash. Now they've got a way. Now we're going to make that instant. And they're just trying to make it a little bit more convenient so that it's like a no-brainer for a lot of people. Like, well, it's instant money. Like I get it right back. And I get my Social Security and all that stuff instantly on my card. Hell yeah, I'm in.
Right. And then you see all these cashback rewards programs and everything else. And, it's alluring. It's absolutely alluring. Let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below. We've got more news, to get to on your Monday.
You know what I used cash for this weekend? The bees.
The bees.
I bought the bees with cash.
She bought like 5,000 bees.
I did. I bought a beehive.
That's awesome.
I'm super excited about it.
So we're gonna have.
So now you guys have chickens, goats, and bees.
I don't have any goats.
We don't have any goats
yet.
Oh,
I do want some goats.
We have.
Do we
have a llama?
Talking about goats all the time.
Yeah, that's just Phil. His goat obsession. Do we have any llamas yet?
No, I really wanted a grazing animal to help with the biome of our soil.
We have a teenage boy, so that's going to be your grazing.
Have you considered goats?
So. We have considered goats. I was going for a buffalo, but Clayton said no.
You're such a goat pusher. A buffalo. I would love a buffalo.
Buffaloes are grazing animals.
I went to a buffalo farm in Indiana one time.
But the buffalo is blocking the walkway, so I'm just going to stay right here.
Yeah. I'm not going to be going anywhere for a couple of hours while this buffalo takes a nap.
So I am a novice beekeeper. I welcome any and all suggestions about my bees. I'm very excited about them. And I'm excited to, what I'm most excited for is like the moment when I give teachers gifts that are honey. That I have harvested.
Homemade honey.
This is my nerdy little fantasy here.
I was envisioning a box of bees, so I'm glad you didn't go that way.
Thank you. Oh, this is honey.
No, I won't give away any of the bees.
That'd be great.
Shake it before you open it to mix it up.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of fresh things, I want to tell you about our friends over at HelloFresh. Because with HelloFresh, you can get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients like honey and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. You can skip the trip to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. And that's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Now, they take the hassle out of mealtime this spring by delivering pre-portioned ingredients and easy-to-prepare recipes right to your door. I was actually just telling Clayton today, when we're getting back to spring break and we're getting back into the routine of, like, you know, cooking for the kids and meal planning, all that, I was like, I'm so uninspired. Going back to my, you know, weekly roast chicken and chili and tacos and all of that stuff. And this is a great way to sort of bring new recipes into your life that you don't have to learn on YouTube or, you know, shop out all of the ingredients. Just get it delivered to you and you can add that boost into your meal planning. April is Earth Month, and HelloFresh is always committed to a cleaner planet. On average, HelloFresh meals have 31% lower carbon footprint than the same meals made from supermarket ingredients. Plus, nearly all HelloFresh packaging materials are curbside recyclable in most of the U.S. Good food is too precious to waste, so HelloFresh's pre-portioned ingredients cut down on your food waste by at least 23% compared to grocery shopping, which is good for your wallet and the planet. For instance, when you are just trying to make something, I was trying to make something with miso paste, and then I'm like, I don't need the whole jar, and I don't know if I'm going to make this again, so it goes bad. So, in order to try it out for yourself, go to HelloFresh.com/redacted50 and use code redacted50 for 50% off, plus your first box ships for free. So once again, that's HelloFresh.com/redacted50 and use our code redacted50 for 50% off. Thank you so much for their support of our show. That's HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit.
N Hunting House in Australia says they're culling, meaning killing, billions of bees in Australia right now.
Why?
I don't know anything more about this story. N Hunting House says this on Rumble. Can you give us more details about that? We'll look it up. Other people said we want to see Natalie's bee outfit.
Oh, yeah. I do have a good beehive outfit.
But she didn't have, this is the...
I didn't have the hat on yet.
She sent me this photo, but she didn't have the bee helmet on. So we need to have a bee helmet photo posted.
Okay.
Because it looks, she looks like Walter
I actually think they might mean the yellow and black striped sweater.
Oh, that one.
The bee sweater. She looks like Walter White from like Breaking Bad here. Like she's like one of the... Yeah. Is she?
Your neighbor's going to think you're cooking stuff over there.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. All right. Yes, I'm a brand new beekeeper. It's very exciting. All right. Well, the United Nations says that we should decriminalize all sex and drug-related activity in the name of human rights. This includes sex with minors, and they want you to be able to poop on the street. Is that what we consider progress for human rights? What about your right not to live in a place where we traffic minors and poop on the streets?
Can I move to that place?
It is not your right, apparently, to live in a place like that.
Minus trafficking the minors, I wouldn't mind not having to look for a bathroom all the time when I really got to go, just out driving around.
So,
pull over and
I think you can poop in the woods. Do that. I don't care. It's good for the soil biome.
But just don't do it right in front of the 7-Eleven when I'm going in to get a Slurpee at 11 o'clock.
But do you want to live in a place where people poop on the streets regularly where you need to walk?
No. I don't want people leaving their dog poop on the streets. Pick that up too.
Exactly.
Michael Schellenberger makes this great argument in his book, San Francisco, and I'm going to talk about this more later, but that Harvey Milk really became famous not because he was the first openly gay mayor and, openly gay was not a big deal in San Francisco during the age of Harvey Milk, but his big platform was that San Francisco residents need to pick up their dog poop on the street. This was a big problem. No dog poop on the street, and he was able to really make this a big platform and become famous because of it. And then also he was flamboyant and openly gay. But, now we've come full circle that sort of the corruption inside of San Francisco is such that people do pick up their dog poop and also allow human poop.
They're pick up after their dogs while they're going number 2.
Well, I don't think the same people are doing
While I'm down here, I'll just relieve myself, but I'll pick up after you, Grover.
But there's a tolerance for human poop and an intolerance now for dog poop. So let's go through what the United Nations is saying about these human rights. And, what they're trying to say is that if you criminalize things like sex and drugs, it's racist and it's against human rights. It violates people's human rights. okay, that's a nice thought that we don't want to criminalize people for things that maybe shouldn't be criminalized, but we're going so far in the other direction now that there is no longer a consensual age, an age of consent for minors is what they're saying. So, whatever, 4-year-old, do it. And there is no way to criminalize. I don't know if there's another word for this. I didn't go too far down looking it up, but do we still call them pimps? People who make money from selling other people's sex?
I mean, you just did.
Is there a more forward word for using?
Is there a new, like a Biden administration approved?
I think it's entrepreneur
word?
Now.
Entrepreneur.
I know.
I was going to suggest.
Public schools.
Yeah. I was going to suggest unconventional entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Unconventional entrepreneurship, yes.
Okay by everyone if I use pimp? Yeah?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I'm down with that.
Is there any YouTube terms of service against talking about pimps?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm not going to tell you how to do it.
Not yet.
The United Nations thinks it's A-okay that you do it, so I'm going to assume that YouTube thinks so too. Okay, this all comes from the United Nations organization called UNAIDS. It was a report that was released on March 8th, Women Day. Here's the cover of the report, and it's sort of a best practices suggestions for international communities on how to police or not police conduct associated with sex, reproduction, HIV, drug use, homelessness, and poverty. Also, of course, there's some gender identity thrown in there for good measure. Here are the frameworks that they say that they're talking about. They want to basically talk about, these things: sexual reproductive health, consensual sex, gender identity, gender expression, HIV non-disclosure, drug use, and homelessness and poverty. Now, it's a very strange document. And I'm going to skip straight to the most strange thing. The most disturbing is Principle 16 around consensual sexual conduct. They're saying that pretty much no consensual sexual conduct should be criminalized. It's same sex as well as different sex relations, consensual sexual relations between trans or non-binary people, all kinds of combinations, premarital, extramarital, no criminalization of sex, period. With respect to the enforcement of criminal law, any prescribed minimum age of consensual sex must be applied in a non-discriminatory manner, meaning we sort of take into account that persons under 18 can make decisions about engaging in consensual sexual conduct and their right to be heard. There is no age limit here when you read through this. So, I can see how maybe you don't want to send someone to prison for life for having sex with a 17-year-old when they're 19. Okay, but 7? 12? 4? Right. No age at all?
If they can decide their gender and to be on puberty blockers and stuff like that at that age, then why not? These decisions that these kids are going to be able to make are going to keep expanding to, like, they want to get married now all of a sudden. They want to live with somebody. Like, it's just further going to expand.
Well, they want to go into debt. They want, give a 4-year-old a credit card. That's sure.
Well,
Let's do all of that.
You and I were talking about this.
Great idea.
You and I were talking about this story in the kitchen, and Miles, our 12-year-old, said, "Daddy, what's a minor? Like, what is a minor?" And I said, "It's you until you become an adult at age 18. Until then, I'm king, she's queen, and you do what we tell you to do." Right? And I said, "So we rule the roost until you're an adult, then we kick you out." And he said, "What if I don't want to leave?" I'm like, "I don't want you to leave either, buddy, but you know what I mean. Like, once you go at 18, you're an adult legally under the law. Like, we know that that's when you can serve. That's when you can serve in the military. That's when you can go to war."
That's when you can vote. In Europe, that's when you can drink. Even though we know the process of demyelination, I think is what it's called, is the process of full maturity of the brain doesn't end until 30. But I guess the United Nations thinks that we should take into account the consensual conduct of minors, that they can decide and they can say for themselves. So I can see how 17 and 18 is something that could be considered. But now they're saying decriminalize completely all age groups. I don't think I should have to make an argument why that's problematic.
Well, and that's what the LGBTQIA plus stands for. There's actually maps now, which are minor attracted people, and they even have their own flag.
Yes.
Which just blows me away.
Yeah, but they're definitely not generally accepted in the LGBTQ community. They're just that's them pushing themselves in there where they're not generally. There's no reason to think they will be.
Right. These groups, LGB and the TQIA plus have diverging platforms, and we've been making this argument for a really long time. But they want to make the argument that that gay is queer, and queer is then something you can apply to all manners of deviance, for lack of a better word. Now, the United Nations says that criminalization of sexual practice is unduly leading to torture, arrest, discrimination, and removal of human rights. In fact, they say by, criminalizing anything really in general is problematic. Here's their introduction saying criminal law is among the harshest of tools that we have, and it ought to be last resort, basically, like criminalizing everything is last resort. It's bad. It's taking away human rights. This document, which I do recommend you read and let me know how you feel about it, the UN is saying that it's important to be free to express whatever sexual act you'd like and not be, criminalized for it. But it is not your right to not have someone express those acts on you. So if you're the victim of a sex crime, too bad for you. Someone else was free to do it. That was their freedom to do it to you. It's not your freedom to not have it done to you.
So this is just going to be like a society full of flashers, right?
Yeah. We're deciding whose rights are more important. The victims of sex crimes? No, not important. The sexual perpetrators, their right to do those things is more important than my right to not be abused sexually.
Like when I was a kid, I was at the Berkshire Mall with my friend Ben.
I don't know where you're going with this, but oh, yes, I do.
And it's an important story. And I've heard this from other boys, my age, who have had similar stories to this. It's happened to a lot of boys that, it's like embarrassing to talk about, but let's talk about it. So my friend Ben and I were at the arcade at the Berkshire Mall in Reading, Pennsylvania, our favorite arcade. And we're out in the food court area and going to the bathroom. And this guy, and we're like, I don't know, young. So we're like, you listen to authority figures. I thought he was a security guard. I didn't know what he was. And he's like, come over here, guys. And I don't know what he was doing. He waved us to the bathroom. And then he wanted to try to show us stuff, if you know what I mean. And we both were like, let's get out of here. And we hightailed it out of there. And we ran out. We did not go back to the arcade. And then we ran and looked for a security guard. And we told them what had happened. And the security guards were like, let's go right now. And they mobilized to go find this creeper, And I don't know if they ever found the guy, but
well, that was a human rights abuse to him.
Yeah, apparently I'm not allowed to be offended by that.
No, you're not allowed to not see that. You have to.
Oh, I should have had to stay and watch.
His rights are to do it to you.
Yeah,
your rights are not to have that not done to you.
I give up in society.
According to the United Nations.
Oh my God.
That should not be criminalized. As it is right now, voyeurism and exhibitionism is illegal in most places. Oh my God. The United Nations doesn't think that that's a good thing. Here's something else they advocate. Is what I want to call the Jeffrey Epstein clause. The UN says that no one should be arrested, not just for sex work, buying or selling sex work, but also for pimping sex work, because we didn't agree on a different word. So yes, the exchange of sexual services for money or goods, totally fine, whether you're buying or selling. But look at the second paragraph. Criminal law may not proscribe the conduct of third parties who directly or indirectly for receipt of a financial or material benefit under fair conditions. What are fair conditions, first of all, of sex work? Let's put a pin in that. They can't be punished for facilitating, managing, organizing, communicating. Basically, all that stuff's okay. You can pimp out people for money. You benefit from it. So you can see why I'm calling this the Epstein clause. G-Max and her crew should not have been prosecuted. Her human rights to traffic people are more important than the traffickees. Pimp's rights, I guess. This seems to be part of a growing movement that sex work is work. This is something I've seen a lot online, that people are taking to the internet and calling sex work a good, hard, honest day of work, and calling out anyone who thinks that maybe someone should want something different from themselves. They're calling it TERF and racist and classist. Like if you say the sex work is exploitative, you're out of touch because you're classist and elitist for saying those things.
Right.
But think about who is saying this. People who are not sex workers are saying this. Disenfranchised sex slaves in Africa and Asia, they don't take to Twitter and say, it's my right to be trafficked, right? Who's speaking for them? Right now, criminal law is speaking for them. It's supposed to be illegal. The UN is making the case that they shouldn't have those rights. The abusers instead should have rights. The UN also thinks...
Well, that's gonna...
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say really quick, that's going to make Bill Gates happy. He's no longer going to have to refer to them as dinners. He can tell them what they are.
These dinners with Jeffrey Epstein and his
also,
group.
Can I ask you this? I've seen this people say a lot in the chat. There's a sort of normalizing of like this sex work now, this idea of OnlyFans. Like when we were asking for like a new name for pimps, and a bunch of people said, no, the new name for pimps is OnlyFans.
Okay.
So maybe there's like a normalization of it, right? That, you can't ban these people. You should absolutely, this is a day's work, a good, honest, hard day's work. And that's what you should do with it.
To various degrees. It has now become that if you speak out for someone to maybe not want to do sex work, you are out of touch and elitist. And so, yes, there absolutely is this normalization of using up people's bodies as commodities.
Right.
And so, about drug use. The UN thinks that no drug use should be criminal. Here is their bit about that. Not possession, not purchase, not use, not holding any of these kits, not seeking out health services for drug use. Nothing about drug use should be policed. So it is not only your right to do drugs, it is not your right to live in a drug-free place. Meaning if you live in a neighborhood ripped apart by drugs and violence, too bad for you. There should be no law enforcement or government trying to make that not the case. Now, again, I want to refer to Michael Schellenberger's book, San Francisco. He talks about how when you do not criminalize drugs, you end up with a lot of people dying on the street. That's their right, I guess. According to the UN. It's not your right to live in a place where people don't die on the streets of drugs. In fact, in one study, he found that if you do not force people to get clean, but you just give them houses, they do stay in the homes for the duration of the housing experiment. But the twist in this data, and this was done in San Francisco, is that giving people houses did not reduce the rate of deaths because they were allowed to continue to be on drugs. They just were in a house. There were 37 deaths out of the 199 participants in the control group and 33 deaths out of the 224 in the experimental group. And so it was so surprising that people who are not asked to get clean don't get clean and just die in a more comfortable place. They still die. They just maybe die slower, or they die inside instead of outside. Is this the outcome the UN wants, just to let people OD themselves to death as a human right because of body autonomy? And the resulting communities where people live and then have to, be addicted to drugs, well, yeah, they say you should be able to poo and pee on the street because, you've cultivated this drug addiction, possibly sex addiction too, and you should not be criminalized for engaging in life-sustaining economic activities in public places, such as begging and panhandling, vending, hawking, or other, even hawking or other informal commercial activities involving non-contraband items, or engaging in life-sustaining activities in public places like sleeping, eating, preparing food, washing clothes, or it says even urinating and defecating in other public spaces. It sure does seem to me like the UN is in favor of social collapse, does it not?
So that's what I want to ask you here at the end of this, which is, again, when you see a story like this, you're like, oh my God, these progressives, they're ruining everything. They're driving us into the ground. But maybe I ask you this, isn't it part of the plan? Because if you think about what the World Economic Forum wants, they don't want us to work out of the house. They want us to work from home.
Right. This is the theory of why they're doing this on purpose.
Right. Are they doing it on purpose? That's what I'm throwing it out there. Because why? It's scary to leave the house. You want to go down the street in Chicago right now and go get a burger? Watch out for Jesse Smollett. You just walk all the people that are walking down the street right now in Chicago, in San Francisco. Do you want to do that? Because I can work from home. I don't have to commute. I can stay. I can do all of this remotely. I can have everything taken care of for me because it's scary out there. And this is a way to sort of force us more inside.
I suppose. That's
if you, I don't know, Natalie, if when you were in San Francisco, if you drove by the Tenderloin District, but if you drive over in the Tenderloin District in San Francisco, this is pretty much what they have done. They have made drugs legal. They give them paraphernalia. They give them everything they need. And people are just laying on the streets. They're breaking in and stealing stuff. But nobody is doing anything about it. They've removed police power. They've removed all the things that can keep people from doing that. And so there's a reason that they're doing that. And so it obviously has to be what some of these people want. Otherwise, they would be doing something about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories about why. What Michael Schellenberger calls the homeless industrial complex, because there is a lot of money, competing money, government money, your money, going around to different competing organizations. And there's law enforcement, and then there's homeless advocates, and they don't work together. And, they are incentivized to not solve this as a problem. Why would the United Nations want this to feed into the homeless industrial complex? Why would they want to dehumanize human bodies to the point that it would be socially acceptable to have consensual sex with a 10-year-old? I don't know. I mean, this feeds into sort of my theories about transhumanism, is just break down the entire human experience in order to that maybe seems like a leap. I don't know. There's so many whys here. Why remove the age of consensual sex? Why, allow people to do drugs to their own detriment, to the detriment of them and the people around them? Why, I think of little old ladies who are living in communities where they've raised their families that are now drug infested and full of crime, and we're like, well, sorry, old lady, we're not going to help you because it's their rights to do these things around you. I don't know. I really don't know. But this is a real document. The United Nations really thinks this. I really feel like I'm living in a clown world. Let us know what you think about it in the chat.
It is amazing
I got two questions. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry. I was going to say it's amazing. The most amazing documents of this, the most amazing things that we cover here on the show, don't come from weird out of the world places. They come from the United Nations on their website, or the World Economic Forum on their website. So people can say, oh, this is tinfoil hat stuff or whatever. No. Go read what they've spent months putting together and researching and deciding that this is the publication they were going to put out. And no media will cover this, but we're covering it here. Go ahead, Philip. I was going to say, I have two questions on this. One is I wonder how long it will be until somebody comes out and says, "No, this wasn't supposed to be released. This an intern did it." And the other one is just to bring up some of the images again. But why the hell are they decorated with barbed wire?
I was wondering that too.
Who uses barbed wire as your graphic design choice?
Yeah, look at the beginning of it.
It's so bizarre.
Can you go back to the cover? It's like a sort of, chubbier woman of color with gray hair, and she's locked up for, I don't know what this is supposed to represent.
I do. I mean, it's kind of she's in shackles,
for being
homeless. She doesn't have clothing. She's unkempt, but she's also then wrapped in barbed wire because she can't just poop wherever she wants. So this is the last thing keeping her from her freedom. It's her ability to wash anywhere where she wants. Maybe that's my theory. The barbed wire.
So many questions.
Yeah.
So many questions.
I have one more question from our chat room on YouTube. One of our chatters asked, so will they cancel To Catch a Predator? Remember the famous show? Was it an NBC show or ABC show?
Yeah, that's racist and classist.
Chris Hansen, yeah. To Catch a Predator.
But they built the whole canceled.
Oh, did it get canceled already?
No, it's huge on YouTube.
Quite a while back, actually.
Oh, okay.
Well, old versions of it, but the actual TV show got canceled. I can't remember there was some big to do about their last episode that they ended up getting canceled. That was years ago.
Yeah, but he does them. He still does them on YouTube, but the TV show is no longer around.
Yeah, now that's a
you're right.
Human rights violation.
Yeah, I mean, by this definition, who do we prosecute then? There's nothing left, really, to prosecute.
I mean, I feel if you...
Mass shooters? No, it's their right to do that, to express their Antifa sentiment.
We'll go after you, though, if you own a gun. We'll go after you and track you. We'll do that. Who do we arrest?
Gun possession?
Well, that's what I was just talking about that on the...
Pay your taxes.
Yeah, I was just talking about that with the Fed Now system. It's like the Restrict Act, I mean. So in the Restrict Act, they'll be able to know every transaction you make, and if there's something that they don't want you to buy, like we were talking about limiting how much gas you can buy, they don't want you buying these magazines. These magazines hold too many bullets. We don't have to ban it. You just won't be able to buy it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you won't have cash because we're getting rid of your cash. So
exactly,
we'll be able to track every transaction you make. So how are you going to make this payment? We'll ban crypto, so we'll use our crypto 2.0, which is this new digital currency. Crazy stuff, guys.
Well, read the document and let us know what you think. I'm going to put it in tomorrow's newsletter, so you can click it there or in the description below as well.
Before we get out of here, I want to tell you about this. The thing about running your own business is every single hire counts. No hiring partner understands that like Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, you can interview, you can hire all in one place. You don't need to spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills. When you do that with Indeed, you can do that all with Indeed right there under one roof. It's so easy. You can find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed's Instant Match, their assessments, their virtual interviews. If you hate waiting, Indeed's U.S. data shows that over 80% of Indeed's employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Almost everyone in our family uses Indeed for hiring. Our sister-in-law uses it for hiring for their company. My mom, who's the CEO of a nonprofit in Pennsylvania, uses Indeed for hiring there as well. And guess what? My mom... she loves it. She's actually used our sponsor code here, and she's managed to save some money. That's right. So she's done this before, and she went to Indeed.com/redacted, and what she did was she was managed to make every dollar count, because if you're a nonprofit and you're helping people with disabilities, which is what my mom's company does, they need to hire with Indeed. You want to save money. You're only paying for quality candidates and applications that match your must-have job requirements. Indeed knows hiring needs to be cost-effective when you're running your own business. Indeed knows that when you're doing everything for your company, you can't afford to overspend on hiring. Visit Indeed.com/redacted to start hiring right now. Just go to Indeed.com/redacted. Indeed.com/redacted. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. So thank you guys for being great spirits here with us on this Monday, our first day back from flu vacation.
He had the flu. I'm fine.
Yeah, she was fine. I'm on day 5 of the flu. So hopefully tomorrow I'll be back to normal, because they say 5 days. I still have a fever right now. I
want to tell you guys about this awesome thing. So, Clayton took a COVID test and it's negative. And then our daughter was sick our youngest has also been sick with him. Same fever, same symptoms. And her fever got pretty high. And I know for children, the fevers get higher. So I decided to take her into the walk-in clinic today. And they were able to do a fingerprint test where they do just a simple blood test. And they can tell if your virus is viral or bacterial, which means that then you won't get antibiotics when you don't need them. And I was like, when did we start this? He goes, the fever, because it went and came back, seems like it's just viral, but let's test to be sure. And she was really pissed about getting the fingerprint prick, but at least it wasn't a full-blown shot or a blood draw. And now there's technology that's been in use for less than a year where they can tell if you have a virus or a bacterial infection and not prescribe antibiotics when it's not needed. And I think that that's so awesome. If you've ever been a mom or a dad who's gone with your child to the pediatrician and just agonized on whether or not they need antibiotics, now you can know. I was super excited about this technology. Apparently we live in Portugal, and it was a Portuguese doctor who came up with it, and it's now in use in the EU. If you've had experiences with that, let me know.
Yeah,
I just think it's
a
really cool technology now to reduce our dependence on antibiotics as well.
So let us know in the U.S. if it's been rolled out yet, if you guys have had it yet. That's great to know. Here's a question from Ivan. Ivan B says, hey, Redacted team, question for the staff. Is it true that the new currency will have the ability to expire according to the issuer's wishes? Now, we covered this on the show before about how this is a feature, this is a feature of what the I forget who wrote on the Fed's website as part of their plans for the FedNow program. They talk about the beautiful benefits of the expiration of currency, right? We're going to give you stimulus. Think of it like stimulus. And China's already using this expiration option within their digital currency, their CBDC. So why in the world would they not use this? Now they'll spin it to you as a positive, right? They're going to say, hey, if there's a community that's really in need right now, we will give you some extra cash in your account. We want you to go spend it for these 3 days only as a stimulus for this particular market area or whatever. After 3 days, you won't be able to use it anymore, and it'll expire. Or like in the wake of a hurricane or something like that, you only have 2 weeks to use it. So you better go use it as a stimulus, to help you through this hurricane. That's how they'll spin it, right? But can you think of other nefarious ways that they would have this capital expire on you? I can think of all sorts of ways. I can also think of all sorts of ways that politicians would use this nefariously, right? Giving certain stimulus, targeting certain areas, giving additional capital to certain markets, certain areas that are certain types of voters. Think about that. And other people would not have access to it. So who knows? It's not out fully yet or officially rolled out, but I can't imagine that they won't have some sort of a expiration on the capital, the money supply. That's certainly something the Fed absolutely has already been talking about and loves. You can read about it on their website. They love it.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. I am out of steam. I can't talk anymore.
You made it. All right. We'll see you here tomorrow. We're back in action. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for joining us when we came back. Feels really good to be back. I'm rested.
Yeah, and
ready.
Make sure you're all subscribed, whether it's on Rumble or YouTube. Just hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys so much, and we'll be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Bye, everyone.